when I was with horses, I felt so free, so alive, so adventurous. Like, I wanted the adrenaline rush. I wanted to gallop across fields bareback as fast as I could.
That there's so many different ways to be with our horses, not just riding, lunging, long reining.
So when we enter this timelessness with horses, when we enter that place where time just dissolves, you are absolutely free. So if you look at an image that has like a tender moment between a woman and a horse, okay, I want you to feel that and put yourself in that position. Is that what you're longing for? How can you find that with your horse again?
And actually you use a lot of quotes and poetry, Nica, in your work. And just to pluck one of the quotes that really stood out to me was one that you said, "For how I loved horses was not love at all." What was your relationship with horses? How were you loving horses in the wrong way? And how did that shift over the years?
What does it mean to truly love a horse? How can we undo negative conditioning from our past? And why do horses unlock our creativity? Nica Quinn is an equine artist, drawing a deeper connection to ourselves, nature, and horses. She's originally from Wisconsin, but she's now living in Scotland, where she leads creative connection workshops, bringing women together out on the land. Nica started working with horses in the saddle as a trail rider, but it was years later that she changed her communication and relationship with horses forever. And she wants to help others do the same. Let's find out more, shall we, in this episode.
Nica, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Thank you so much for having me.
For those who haven't seen your beautiful illustrations, they are thought-provoking, they're playful, they capture the mind and the spirit. They're absolutely stunning, and we'll delve into your horse artistry throughout the chat, Nica. But first of all, talk to us about your journey with horses and how they came to find you.
Well, they found me at a very young age. I think I was just one of those kids that was just naturally inclined and loved horses, as many of us do. However, I didn't have horses regularly in my life up until, even now I'm pretty irregular with my horse time. But I went every year to a guest ranch. And I spent it was just like a week out of every year with horses. And that was like the highlight of my life. And then I ended up working there when I was older. So that was when I started getting a little bit more, having them more consistently in my life. And really starting to learn a little bit more about everything all at once. It was like I was just thrown into the pit, like I barely had any actual guidance. It was like I went from 0 to 60. It was like I had to learn about horses while also learning how to take people out on rides and make sure everyone's safe and make sure, all of that. So I quickly had to become, whether I liked it or not, I had to pretend that I knew what I was talking about, which leads you down a slippery slope sometimes. So then I thought I knew everything about horses, which is hilarious. And then, years later realized how backwards I'd learned so many things.
And what was the catalyst for your discovery that actually you didn't know horses at all?
How it goes with, they make you become more introspective about yourself, and then you realize you have emotions and you have to address them. So yes, for me it was a horse that was unlike any other horse I'd ever met at that point, and he made me question so many things because I could just tell that he was not going to do the things like every other horse would that I asked, so he really sent me on quite a journey, and it was actually it's a very long story. But basically, he kind of gave me the courage to speak up for him And then in turn learned to speak for myself. And then in that kind of moment is when I really questioned a lot of things. And I decided that the way I'd been doing things, I just could no longer do. That I had to seek something new. And it was heartbreaking because then it goes with all of the guilt and all of the shame that I'd felt for the years of how I'd treated horses, which I thought was out of love, but it really, really was actually the opposite when you look at it. And, you know, it never came from a ill-intentioned place, but just how we are indoctrinated into the horse world often is through dominance and through techniques that really are quite outdated at this point.
And actually you use a lot of quotes and poetry, Nica, in your work, and just to pluck one of the quotes that really stood out to me was one that you said, "For how I loved horses was not love at all." What was your relationship with horses? How were you loving horses in the wrong way? And how did that shift over the years?
Oh my God. That line, when I wrote that line for the first time, it shook me. Like it did something to me, writing those words down, because it was so raw. Like it made me reflect. Like I didn't even know that's how it felt until those words came out, you know? And so how I thought I loved horses was actually, I equated them to freedom. And I used them as a symbol of freedom rather than loving the horses for who they were. And what I mean by that is when I was with horses, I felt so free, so alive, so adventurous. Like I wanted the adrenaline rush. I wanted to gallop across fields bareback as fast as I could, you know, like that was, and I did those things, you know, like I had those adventures and I had those moments with horses that I will always treasure. And I thank the horses that allowed me to do such things at that time. But yeah, relating or equating the horses to freedom was not seeing them for who they were. So by thinking that I loved them, I was actually loving what they gave me. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they loved it too.
Oh, you can, when you have these conversations and open up this sort of talk, it does, as you say, shake something within you, because anyone who loves riding is loving the experience that the horse is giving us. So it does move all of us, doesn't it, in a different way? Coming to that realisation that it's through the experience that we're connecting with the horses. How did that shift in you, and how did you make changes to actually look at horses in a different light?
Yeah, it was quite an undoing, right? So it was like a swing of the pendulum. I had to go the complete opposite direction to know where I wanted to land. So I had to just start over. That's what it felt like. So I was just like constantly reading and listening to whatever audiobooks, podcasts, like people talking about things. I didn't know where to start either. Like at this point in my journey, I'd never really quote unquote followed anybody in the horse world. Like I wasn't on social media really, like, you know, just for the odd pictures for my family and stuff. But yeah, like I didn't even know that there was this whole world of information and that there was other people feeling this way. So I was really on a search of, so if I found one thread, like one podcast, then I would like follow that golden thread to the next, to the next, to the next. And like, I was like, wow, there are a lot of people talking about this stuff. So it really just opened my mind like so fast, and I absorbed it like a sponge. And at the same time, I worked at a different place than I was doing before. And even there, where I thought, because I was learning positive reinforcement, and like I was learning more about body work and about energy work, and like I was really tapping into that more. And yet I could still feel something wasn't it. So, and it was interesting that those feelings were coming up, even though I thought that I was doing the right thing, in quotes. And yeah, so I started questioning more and more and going deeper. And so that's when I started like creating art about it, because I was trying to figure out what I was feeling. And at the same time, I was trying to, and whether I knew it or not at the time, I was connecting with the horse collective, if you will. And it was almost like I was allowed to explore these different facets and feelings with horses just through my art and not actually having to be around them. So in this time, I actually stopped being around horses for a while. And it was, at least in like a quote, like training way or a doing way. So at that time, I spent a lot of time with my friend and her sanctuary herd. And we just would sit in the field and just be with the horses and communicate with them in ways that I had never gotten to with horses before, and just let them be completely free. You know, like I never once we didn't do anything with them. We allowed them to be horses, right? And it was just so beautiful and so inspiring. And yeah, so a lot of my art during that time was really exploration, and I started sharing it online and realizing that other people felt the same and that they were resonating with what I was sharing. And so it was really like an infinity loop. It was just like the attention was definitely fueling me to keep going, but it was like the people receiving these messages and feeling inspired by it was also keeping me going. And so it was like these deeper and deeper layers that I was allowed to go into with my art. And it's been a fascinating journey. And it's only been since, like, the art, this part of it, this art exploration has only been since 2020. It happened literally after COVID. Yeah. So
gosh, you would never have known. With your artistry, it looks like you've been taking to the easel and painting for many decades. It looks like, something you've done throughout your life.
I have actually. Art has been the centerpiece of my entire life. So I will say that yes, I have been, but I was actually more at the easel. So my digital journey really started in 2020, and the sharing of it. So before, it was just I would paint, and I would paint horses. So I've been painting horses since, for quite a while. But yeah, it was more of this like symbolic work that has been started since 2020. And I can't believe, like, it feels like a lifetime ago at this point. I cannot believe how much has changed and grown and how much I've evolved since then. And I look back, and there is this thread that I can see through the whole time, is that it's always been about connecting with people, and not necessarily that like I want to, I need to personally connect with all these people, but that I've always had this underlying feeling of what I was searching for then was that feeling of not being alone in this. And I know that there's other people feeling the same. So my purpose, I guess, with sharing my art is to allow people to know that they are not alone on this journey, and allowing it to be a place that people with all perspectives can still enjoy one thing, because that's something to me that art brings in whatever form, is that everyone's going to look at it through their own minds. I don't have to be so specific about what everything means, because it's going to mean something different to me than to you. And that's the beauty of it, is that it gets to resonate and meet people where they're at. Yeah.
And did you find art to be a bit of a therapy and also quite a helpful activity to do out on the sanctuary with the horses, in replacement of doing a physical activity with the horses like riding them? Because I imagine taking that leap from enjoying the ridden experience to then doing nothing with horses, I imagine must have been a bit of a junction for you.
Yes, thanks for touching on that, because it's a transition point I feel like is really difficult for people. Is like, okay, now what? You
Yeah.
know, I'm
What
at
do I
this
do now?
pause. Like, what do I do? And it was, as much as I felt like it was like, oh, I'm longing for horse time, but that's what it was. I was longing for being around horses. I realized at the core of what it was that I originally, you know, as a child, why I loved horses was because I just wanted to be around them. And that is, yeah, that's what I kept coming back to. And so for me, actually, it wasn't that difficult of a transition because it really still fueled me with the same feelings. And it allowed me to feel like I think this was a mask, but it allowed me to not make mistakes during the unlearning process. And maybe that's a little perfectionist tendency that I didn't think I had until this moment. But now that I'm looking at that, I'm like, interesting. And because I got to unlearn, relearn, shift, pivot, like take in new information and never be set on one perspective, because I didn't have a horse I was working with that, oh my God, I trained them this way and that's just how it is now. You know, I got to like really, I mean, I'm still in it. I get to still do that because I'm not currently, you know, I don't have just one horse. I'm going to have my own horse. I work with, at the moment, what I'm doing, and this feels like the core theme for everything, is I really am working towards just inspiring people to be present with their horses. And so the in-person things that I'm currently doing is simply bringing people to horses, bringing people into the herd, allowing them to experience what presence is with them and allow that to be peaceful. And in that, inherently things shift. And you don't have to love horses in this obsessive way to feel it.
And I love that you write a lot about your 7-year-old self, Nica, as well. And I've heard this concept talked about before, that we are all, in essence, even as adults, still that 7-year-old child. It's somewhere there within us. All the things that we loved remain. Can you talk us through what that means for you and how you connect to your inner horsey child as an adult?
This is one of my favorite things, because I really truly believe that, yes, if you look back at your 7-year-old self, we'll say, because you've got a little bit more awareness, but you're not yet at that turning point and cusp yet. And I believe they hold so much wisdom, our inner children. They know what it is that lights them up. And whether or not they were allowed to express it will definitely determine, you know, many people's paths. But I was so lucky that I was really encouraged in my artistic notion that I was always just a creative, artistic child, and I was really supported in that. My grandparents were both artists at the time, and it was just like one of those things that it was like, yes, keep a journal, keep a sketchbook, you know, always draw. Like, it was so encouraged to just keep doing it. And I mean, the amount of unicorns and Pegasus and horses that I drew in my journal, in my sketchbook, is ridiculous. So I clearly knew what I loved. And like, I even would write poetry about just how I loved being in nature and it making me feel peaceful. Like, at 7, at 8, you know, like I knew the things that made me happy. And I, again, feel so blessed that I never really strayed away from it, that I was allowed to keep on this path. Yeah, of course, I've had years of not being fully connected, but it's always been there. And I think for many of us, many people are disconnected from their inner children. And, you know, like, for many, many reasons, like we don't have to touch on that. But it's such a healing and inspiring place to go to understand what your purpose is. It's like meeting your inner child, like that really can show you what you're meant to be doing, or at least what your interests are.
And have you got any practical advice that we can all take away with us today, Nica, about finding that inner child and using that when we're around our horses? Because I read, it's quite interesting you touch on this, because I read a post from a very well-known equestrian vlogger called Beth, and she's got a big Instagram following. She's got a few horses, and she recently lost her heart horse. She had to say goodbye. And she found herself very shut down and shut off with horses and really struggling to find the joy in everything again. And she said she had to go back in time and tap into that horsey child that's all inside us somewhere. It might be buried, it might not be. To find that time with horses again and to use that and to be playful with her horses again, because she'd found she'd got so stuck in, her achievements and what she was doing with her horses. How can we do that? Because it's all very well us sort of trying to seek out this inner child, but how do we find them and how do we use that with our horses?
I feel like you even just said it there. It is joy, is play, is curiosity, is being creative. Like, I think creativity and imagination are one of the most powerful things that we have as humans. And by accessing our own creativity, you inherently go back to your inner child, because our children are so creative and imaginative, and it only gets shut off with conditioning and at different levels and at different ages and whatever it may be. But I genuinely believe that doing something creative, any creative act, can lead you back to your inner child. And the more messy and the more nonsensical it is, the better. Because you'll find that joy again for the process. You'll find the joy for not having it be anything. Things don't have to have an outcome to be good. And so this, again, relates to our horses, is that once you go out in the field and you no longer have expectations, you can then find the joy. So when you go out into the field, when you enter, or when you look at a blank canvas, if you have no expectation of what it's meant to be at the end of that, you're going to have so much more fun doing the thing, because you're allowing that energy between the two of you to co-create. And it might sound silly to co-create with a blank canvas, but you're allowing what I call the creative spirit to come through. And your creative spirit could also just be your inner child. But when you allow those barriers to break down and you allow yourself not to hold yourself to any expectation, don't be afraid to put marks on the page because of, it's not perfect, or because you're afraid that somebody will judge you. I mean, that's a huge one. That we judge ourselves, of course, but that fear of judgment from other people is what stops us usually more than anything. So, and again, that goes totally hand in hand with our horses, is that if you enter the field and you allow the horse to co-create with you in this place of energy, of making this time together either absolutely peaceful and still and quiet, or maybe it's joyful and you play and you run around and you allow this beautiful energy between you to be a dance. And again, it's this co-creation, and horses don't live in human time. Time is our own construct. So when we enter this timelessness with horses, when we enter this place where, we know it as a flow state, when we enter that place where time just dissolves, you are absolutely free. And you get to enjoy and be at these, you get to feel these sensations of, pure happiness, I feel like. And that's what people are lacking in not only daily life, but with our horses, is finding that place again. So I mean, that was quite a long answer, but
No, but a totally inspiring answer, because, you know, inside every horse-loving adult, there is that, usually, that a horse-obsessive child, whether they had the chance to be around ponies or not. You know, there was often a fascination, wasn't there, in our histories with ponies. I know that from the fact that when I was a very young child, there were horses across the road from me, sort of so close but yet so far, you know, just within touching distance, but I didn't have my own, and it was sort of getting the confidence to go over and say hello and to ask the owners if I could, you know, feed them a carrot or, you know, come and help them groom. And then that started the relationship as helping muck out the animals, and then being able to sit on my first pony, which was, you know, I was hooked from the minute my bum touched the saddle. But also thinking back to how I loved riding, but also how I was just transfixed being around equines, whether it was in the stable or on the yard, or, you know, I remember being obsessed with just leading ponies up and down. You know, I was so proud to lead my first pony, and I wanted to show my mum and, you know, kind of show off the fact, wow, you know, look, I'm leading along and I'm walking alongside this magnificent beast that towered above me. And it is tapping into that, isn't it? Now having my own horses, taking the time to think, wow, 7-year-old Anna would probably be screaming from the rooftops now that I could just get to be around horses every day of my life, and that's a part of my daily routine. But we all struggle, don't we, with time and work and juggling all aspects of life.
absolutely. And I think what you touched on there, just as awe, I think this is one of my biggest things at the moment that I'm really like excited about and kind of fixated on, is enchantment. So again, it goes back to that inner child, it goes back to play, it goes back to creativeness, and there is something to be said about enchantment and how that opens our world into different realms, maybe. When you see the world through the eyes of everything is so wildly beautiful and magical, and like everything just can make you feel alive and in awe and just humbled, like, then yeah, your 7-year-old self that's leading a pony that's just like, oh my God, I get to stand next to this incredible being. If we lived our lives more from that state, how much more beautiful would life be, period, you know? And how much more fun would it be? How much more peaceful would it be? Because with just this tiny little speck on this massive planet of ridiculous beauty, like, oh my God, from every corner of the world, there's something gorgeous to be seen. And yeah, I just feel like enchantment and wonder and awe are massive pieces to this, yeah, reigniting joy and love for our horses.
And something that we all need to remember and take away with us, that actually if we want to be a bit more connected to our horses or life in general, is to tap into that childlike awe. I think that's such a nice thing to kind of remember when we feel a bit burnt out or we feel like time isn't on our side, actually to slow things down and sort of connect back in. Talking of slowing things down, Nica, you started your horsey life, as you mentioned, on the ranch as a trail rider. I'm intrigued to know, what did you learn from that period in your life, being a trail rider, taking out groups of people, experiencing life in the saddle, working in the saddle, and then now moving into the space of leading workshops with horses on the ground? I mean, such a journey there, such a huge arc that you've taken, and a U-turn, I should say.
Yes, it's funny that when you say it like that, it almost feels like the same thing. Like, in a way, it's like still leading people and horses with safety, with presence in nature. Like, just one version is on the backs of the horses and the other is on the ground. And so I guess clearly there's a thread there of what I've always loved doing. And yes, so guiding people through forests, through mountains, through, like there was even a place I worked at in New Zealand that we would take people to the ocean and swim. And so there's again, so many amazing adventures I had through that. But the thing that it always taught me that is absolutely priceless, because funny enough, I've actually never had a lesson in my life, like a horseback lesson.
Wow.
Ever.
Self-taught.
Yeah, for better for worse. The horses taught me, right? So
yeah,
I learned as a child to canter through forests. Like there was no arena, there was nothing. It was that I was on the back of a horse in the middle of the forest, just running and feeling most alive, So yeah, going back to meeting people and horses through terrain that you never know what's going to happen, is that you have to be so aware of everything, and your senses have to be heightened. You have to be able to multitask like crazy. Like you have to make sure that all the people, all the horses are good, that the deer that's going to pop out of the woods to the left is not going to spook and startle everyone. And that, like there's just so many factors, which again is such a blessing to have experienced all of that, because again, for better or for worse, I saw a lot of things happen. And every experience taught me something. Every experience allowed me to grow, to know horses better, to read into situations better, to read people better. And whether I knew it or not at the time, I was not conscious of this, but it was what was happening. And it also taught me to trust my instincts, my gut, because I mean, if something truly told me not to take that trail today, I wouldn't, because I'd learned before that I felt that, and then we stumbled upon beans, or we, like there's things that would just happen that was just so clear that the less I listened, more was bound to happen, and not for the better. So yeah, it led me to so many adventures and so many interesting situations. But now it also gives me a really interesting scope to look through when bringing people into herds, because I feel this sense of being able to hold that kind of space and be able to look at everybody and watch over everything, because I mean, that's what I had been doing for so long. But now I get to do it from a way safer place.
Wow. Well, though you say way safer, though, do you find additional challenges being on the ground and being in a group and being with horses and walking along? Do you find that there's actually just as much danger around, like you say, deers springing out and wildlife coming across your path? Do you find actually a sense of danger from the ground as well?
I love that you've asked this, because I actually just had this discussion with somebody the other day, and it was something that was brought up at our last event as well, was that when you're fully present, when you're genuinely connected with the herd, like imagine all these people in the field, all these horses slowly grazing about, walking around, sometimes intentionally coming up to people and then leaving and then staying around for a while. And like, there's this really beautiful flow. And every person, by the end of it, was able to feel genuinely connected to the whole. We all felt each other. We all felt the horses. We all felt the land, that there was this golden thread, like following through every single person, because that is how horse herds live, right? We all have this, like, it's the herd consciousness. It's that everyone's connected. And, when you're a part of that feeling, that presence is actually your safety. It's when you become disconnected, when you become unaware, when you are not present, that's when things happen. And of course, something could, pop out and scare everyone. But if you're actually there and connected, you will feel that same sensation that horses feel when they feel alerted by something. So actually, you are still safer, because you will be alerted to whatever is there. And so it's fascinating to see like how safe people do feel, whether they've had horse experience or not.
That's so interesting that you mentioned tapping into our instincts, because actually in many respects it's something we've closed off, hasn't it, over the years, you know, through modern society, but also even with horses. Most equestrians attend lessons or attend coaching, and whatever the weather or circumstance, we're sort of told that we must carry on, you know, must get on with it. You know, if we're feeling a certain way, to sort of put it behind us, get your mind set in check, and get on the horse and ride. When actually it's a breath of fresh air to hear you talk about listening to your instincts, and if the day isn't feeling quite right, or if there's something in the air, to actually give it a miss. And I think I've learnt that as someone who walks my horse out in hand, you know, out on roads, but also cross-country paths and forests. Actually, if there's a bit of a wind whipping through, I might choose to leave it that day and try again another day. Or if the light suddenly fades, I know that my horse doesn't like twilight, so I'll go earlier on in the day. But actually, we're often told that we should ignore those sort of signs and just carry on in order to achieve what we've set out to do.
I mean, even you saying that, I'm like, oh, I'm cringing, because it's like, it's so true. We are forced by society to push through. And as women, especially, we're forced to, and I say forced, but we are, if we want to keep up and be a part of society and working, you know, being in this rat race, you have to push through your own cycle. You have to push through your own, you know, natural rhythms where we live cyclically. Every single month we go through phases, and we have different things happening every single week to our bodies. Oh my God. We are not supposed to just push through. We are not supposed to just get on with it and, you know, keep going to achieve the thing. Like, literally, I'm trying to take your words from what you're saying about how we are in the horse world. It's like, we're not also supposed to be like that in life. And maybe, I mean, I don't think men are either, but there is a difference. Like, they do have a different hormonal balance and stamina that genuinely don't as women. And it's not to say it's a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing when you tune into it. Like, when you actually are connected to your own body and your own body's wisdom and cycle, I mean, it holds all the information you'll ever need. Your body holds all the wisdom that you need to survive in this life. And just like with our instincts, just like with anything, when you listen to that, you will be safer. You will quote unquote achieve more when you listen to that.
Where do you find your courage, Nica, when the world is telling you to get on and get on with it? Whether it's your cycle, whether it's tuning into the horses at the sanctuary, where do you find that inner strength to actually say, no, I'm listening to my body, or I'm listening to the herd today, I'm not going to do it, and I'm going to relax, or I'm going to do something different, or I'm going to change the plan?
That's a really good question. I think it's the amount of times that I didn't. The amount of times that I didn't listen, the amount of times that I didn't, and I push through and I burn out, and I know that. And so it's a self-care thing. It's a preservation thing. It's I don't want to, you know, be burning the candle at both ends anymore. That's not the life that I'm choosing to live anymore. And yes, of course, being self-employed allows me that flexibility. So yes, when having days that I don't feel my best, I feel cloudy, I feel, you know, I don't want to, I just don't work. Even though that other part of me, the voice, sometimes overrules, and then again, I burn out and I learn the lesson again and again and again. But when I do listen and I do take those days of rest, oh my God, I come back so much better and so much more focused just after a day. But if I pushed through, I would have felt guilty about what I didn't get done because I was foggy and unfocused. And then the next day I would feel, even more flustered and more so you learn. I've learned that I have to do those things for myself. And I still fall short sometimes. Like I definitely push through sometimes where I don't want to. And there are things like, I'm leaving for a trip soon, so I have to get all these things done before I leave. Okay. So now I have a time crunch. Okay. But if I set that container and I tell myself that it's because I'm going to rest after, because I'm going to do something different after, it's easier to make that push and not feel burnt out. So yeah, I guess at this point, it's not courage. It's simply caring for myself.
And putting yourself first, which is what so many people don't do. But that brings me on to ask you, Nica, more about your life as an artist, which, as you mentioned, was inspired in 2020. How did you go from someone who worked in the saddle to then actually still working with horses, but in a very different equestrian job, which is one we often don't talk about, as being a horse artist?
It's wild to think that is the jump that I made. I was actually really feeling called to going back to my art after I left some of the jobs I was at, and I traveled through South America for a few months, and when we returned, it was COVID. Literally got back the day before the world shut down, unintentionally.
Oh my gosh.
Like that's just how it happened. It's wild. But yeah, I didn't have any money. I thought I was coming back home to just get a summer job, and then nothing was happening. So it was kind of upon me to go back to the drawing board, right? But because I did go to university. I went to college for graphic design. So I do have that in my toolkit of knowledge, was literally doing what I'm doing today, which is hilarious because when I graduated, I was like, there's no way I'm ever designing logos for people. And I just found it wasn't me, I didn't think, but it was because they were really pushing like corporate things, and I just didn't relate to that. And so I never thought that I would come to a place in my life where I'm literally designing logos and branding for people doing things in an alternative way with horses. Like, we're all...
And I urge anyone, to those listening, to you at home or in your car or around your house, if you've not seen Nica's beautiful artwork, go and check out her website or her Instagram. Nica Draws Nature. It's absolutely beautiful. Talk us through how horses inspire you artistically and how you work with horses. How close do you get? Do you work from photos? How that artistic process works for you?
Yeah, so I guess it's been shifting so much and so rapidly over the years, but I really do draw from a place of channeling a lot of times. And I wouldn't have thought that years ago that that's what I would call it, but it really is. There's a lot because I do a lot of work for other people, and working with other people, I'm not trying to recreate something or create something for me. I'm trying to create something for them. So I'm tapping into their energy and what it is their vision may be, or who their horses were. Like I actually am trying to capture the essence and the spirit of whatever, whether it's a logo or a brand or a portrait of a past horse. Like there's different aspects where it's really about capturing that essence. And so, yes, of course, I can work from reference photos, and that's really helpful because, you can see the life force energy behind the photos, and just tapping into that. But then I also love working from my imagination and just letting it, create itself sometimes. So yeah, there's many different processes, but I'm finding that the logo process has been the most intriguing to me recently, because the people doing the work in this way with horses, like in an alternative way, in a more spiritually connected way, in a way that's going against the grain, those are my people, right? So those are the people that are finding me, like it, and I'm seeing that this is why branding and logos in this world of, that we're digital these days, right? Or that we know how powerful image is. Symbol and image is before words. Like before words were before words were written, symbols were drawn. People wrote in imagery, and there's symbols that have been ancient, that hold resonance throughout the years, that hold wisdom, and you don't have to know what they mean to feel it, right? So we all can associate things culturally, or just like oftentimes we'll have a cultural association with a certain symbol, and you just know what it means by looking at it. You don't need a definition. And now things such as like even a McDonald's sign, like an M, we all just know what that means now. We don't need anything else context-wise. So I know how powerful symbol can be, and now symbol is equivalent to logo. And so if you're trying to do your really purpose-led work in this world and want to make change in the horse industry, and you want to kind of put your mark out there that you're doing things differently, you want an image that represents that, because when people look at it, they don't need to read between the lines as much. They'll see it and they will feel that that's your purpose. They will feel the resonance to it, and if they don't, then they won't come to you. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that we can learn, is that you're not for everybody, and that you don't want clients that are not aligned with you, because that just makes everything harder. That's not, you don't want that. You want to find your people, because you're going to make the most impact there. And so for me to be able to help people do that and create symbols that I call, like, I see them more as magnets. It's like you're trying to magnetize people towards you. You're putting out the intention to gather people, rather than marketing where it's like trying to steal attention.
Oh, that's so powerful. Because also, not only do we want that within our work, but within our tribe, if you like, within our friendship group, we want to attract people into our worlds, don't we, and into our life that align with our morals and our values, and like you say, the way we treat our animals. But it can be often quite difficult to find those people, so you almost use your artistry as a beacon to draw them in.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I've gotten to meet the most incredible people through this so far, and it's just been amazing. Like, I know the power of it from my own lived experience. So I want to be able to give that to other people and allow them to find their people through their own magical symbol that represents them in every way. And it's so interesting. And so, like you said, when you want to find your herd, your people, you have to know what your values are. You have to know what it is you want in somebody else, or else you're going to still attract the wrong people. If you're not aware of the things, if you're not aware of your own patterns, you're going to start attracting people that are probably associated with your previous self, or, other aspects of you that you don't really want to come into your world. But part of the process of the logo creation is to actually know who it is that you're trying to attract. So it's such a powerful thing to genuinely hone in on what it is that your values are, what it is that you are trying to put out into the world, and then who are your aligned people and who are unaligned. And when you know those things, it's almost like this, like a beacon. It's like if you're a lighthouse and you just got this, you're just like calling your people in, and anything else that doesn't fit. And that's great,
Totally. Oh, and I think that will help those listening who, in so many ways, who are on a journey with horses, but also who might be looking at their wider life as well, and who they work with, and who they bring in, and relationships and friends. It really does stem out, doesn't it? And ripple out into our entire world. And I'm wondering, Nica, how horses unlock your creativity and those who join you with your workshops, because with creativity sometimes it can seem like some people are creative, maybe they're born into creative families or artistic households, and then you hear a lot of people say, oh no, I'm not creative, I'm not arty, I can't draw, I can't do this, that and the other. How have horses enabled you to live an artistic life, but also that of others?
Well, I will say right away that everyone is creative. And that's like, it's like baseline humanness, is that's what separates us from other species, is that we have the ability to be creative, like, and actually produce things. So like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, it could be that you enjoy cooking. That's a creative act, that you enjoy, I don't know, there's many, many ways to express yourself in a creative way that doesn't have to look like you're an artist or you're a musician or you're doing something that has, again, an outcome of any sort. And I think that releasing that judgment is really helpful. And it goes back to horses again, right? And genuinely, for me, I believe that horses inspire me in my art because they are such a symbol of so many things. They have been beside human beings for thousands of years, and we have had them in our worlds for so long that they hold many, many, like, again, cultural symbolism, right? So for some, the horse was a messenger between worlds, that they were the ones, like the horse would take you into the spirit world, right? Or the horse literally would take people places. They are pulling the carts, they are tilling the lands, they were riding into war. My God, horses have done so much for us. And now is this shift that we're all going through, that we all feel, that we are actually going through a paradigm shift, not only as a human species, but how we interact with, the world, the living world. And horses, I believe, are, and this is not me being biased because I love them, but that horses are truly trying to gather people to bring them closer to their horses again, because there is so much to unlock there. And they are really along for this ride of our evolution of our consciousness, like they are available for us to open up emotionally, spiritually, and allow us to experience magic again in a way that it's really hard to do without animals and without this this interspecies relationship that comes really special with horses because they are so big and powerful. And yeah, it feels like the horses are calling people to them again. And I guess I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No,
I don't even remember what your question was.
It was a really inspiring and beautiful tangent, and I think we're all transfixed, Nica, and on listening to your stories and your reflections, and I'm wondering, sitting here, what we can all do, but particularly what you hope your art is doing to help sort of undo that conditioning that you've talked about during this episode, that span through the generations with horses. How do you hope your message, your art, your work will shift that in people?
I'd like to see my art as simply, again, that resonance, that if somebody just likes it for what it is and because they like horses, and amazing, that sits on their wall. If they bought a print, awesome, they get to live there. But the frequency behind it is this paradigm shift. So regardless of how they perceive it, that is transmitting in their field. And every time they see it, I hope that it reminds them of something a little deeper. And so I think that I don't feel like it's me. I have to say this, I don't always feel like it's me creating these things. Like I really don't feel fully responsible for these creations most of the time. I feel like I'm doing it on behalf of the horse collective in many ways. And that I just happen to be the one that is going through at the moment, in my style, in my way, in my variation, because we're all unique, right? And yeah, I guess for the most part, I just genuinely hope that it can send a ripple of change, or just thought-provoking, feeling-provoking. That's actually more of it. I don't need people to think about the changes. I want them to feel it. So if you look at an image that has like a tender moment between a woman and a horse, okay, I want you to feel that and put yourself in that position. Is that what you're longing for? How can you find that with your horse again? You know, it's just this deep remembering of and return, right? Return to self, return to presence. And by doing that, then, yeah, I hope that changes things in some way.
Nica, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your stories and your thoughts and your reflections with us. For those who want to get your book that's out right now, how can they do that?
So the book is being sold on my website. I believe it's on Amazon as well, but definitely do it through the website if you can. And yes, just a little side note on the book is that this book is meant for anyone that is intrigued by horses, that has had horses forever, child, adult. It's not meant to be just a kid's book or anything. It's also got at the back, there's a reference section that has more explanation about some of the terms that maybe we covered today, or just ways that you can, and prompts that can inspire you to be in a different way with your horses. So it's not just the poetry, it's not just the imagery, it's also supposed to be practical as well.
Even better. It gets us out with our horses, or out with the horses that we're in touch with in our lives, and gets us moving and behaving in different ways, as we've heard through this chat with you, Nica, that there's so many different ways to be with our horses, not just riding, lunging, long reining, all the terms that we're all really accustomed to, that we all know inside and out, however long we've been around horses, whether we've just got into horses in our lives as adults, or whether they've been a part of our lives since children. We can just go and stand with our horses. We can just go and groom our horses or walk with them. We don't have to be training or working towards a goal, which is so refreshing. And thank you for encouraging it in all of us through your artwork and your poetry. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Nica. It's been so inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share these messages.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way, or you can subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you listen. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners. And you can also follow us on Instagram @Curious Equestrian Podcast. We'll see you next time.